team. Give it everything you got.
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
Never get between a Mandalorian and a weapons package.
This is the way.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
She's as important as he is.
With your hosts, Tricia Barr and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
Welcome, Yeb Cubs, to Fangirls Going Rogue. I am Tricia Barr, one of your hosts, and I have friends everywhere, including Sarah Woloski from Skywalking Through Neverland. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I like what you did there. That means I can talk to you. This chat is unlocked.
It's spy talk.
It's spy talk. I'll follow you anywhere. Oh my gosh. So this month has been pretty crazy. How have you been doing?
You know, horse showing, traveling across 5 or 6 states. But it's been a successful trip. My horse was champion again. The party was started. That's his show name. His barn name is Parker, named after Peter Parker. It's always fun to tell people that and wear Spider-Man gear everywhere. So it was good. And what have you been up to?
Well, yeah, we had a busy couple of weeks. The Disneyland 70th celebration just debuted, which, as we talked about, that was why the whole Season of the Force was like a month early, because they wanted to start the Disneyland 70th celebration. So that began this past Friday, and we were all there, unlocking magic keys all over the park. That's like the new big deal. And then over this past weekend also was Comic-Con Revolution, in which Richard and I did our Skywalking Through Neverland Star Wars trivia show and pop culture trivia show. We had a lot of fun, big turnout, and we did some new things because we're always trying to improve our panels.
I know, I think you're like 10 layers up from when I was your assistant at San Diego Comic-Con a few years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've learned a lot since then, and they are going like clockwork now. They're really fun.
Somebody have to hold I think I had to hold the buzzer or something. It was kind of
You
scary.
did. You held a Greedo, and it was called the Greedo Grab. And we have since purchased like actual physical buttons that people push, and they can tell like who pushes the fastest. They turn green, the one that won. So like actual buzzers. So
They're like game show buzzers.
Exactly. Game show buzzers.
And on top of this busy month, there's been Andor happening, season 2 wrapping up. Also, we had Tales of the Underworld, which you can listen to an interview with the voice of Asajj Ventress, Nikki Futterman, if you want to check that out on Fangirls Going Rogue. And I've been dying to talk about Andor. We did talk about some things from the first 6 episodes in our last episode, but there was a lot of stuff to get to about Star Wars Celebration and visiting Japan and all those things that happened. There was a lot of news. But now we had seen all 12 episodes at the point, but not everybody else had seen all 12 episodes. So we've had a lot of time to sort of curate our thoughts. And then they've sent like Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna and all the cast out there. So we have a lot of just information and, you know, talking about what are we going to discuss for us? I think we ended up with the perfect topic for this show.
Absolutely.
Tony Gilroy talked about the women being the central part of the story, even though it's a story about Cassian Andor, that they really are kind of the glue of this. But I thought before we talk about all that, let's just talk about our overall thoughts of the show. Like, what struck you? What did it make you feel when you're done? Because that's kind of what you want to do. You want to see a show, you want to get to the end, you want to feel something.
That's true. Yeah. And I know immediately after our first watch through, we put in Rogue One, because what else do you do? I mean, Andor, Cassian's walking toward you, walking toward his fate. going to the rings of Kafrene. It's like, well, obviously you got to just hit play on Rogue One. So it was a really good springboard into that movie. But going back to Andor itself, season 2, I mean, it's just so masterful. And as fun as it is to watch it, like, it's even more fun to discuss it because there's just so much to pick apart, so much meaning you can infer from little moments or little looks or just the backgrounds like we talked about in our last episode. And I mean, that moment where Cyril Karn, his final moments on Gorman, right after Cassian asks him, "Who are you?" And then there's so many interpretations of that pregnant pause before he's shot in the head. My interpretation upon first watch was that he was thinking like, oh, my foundation has been rocked. The Empire has hoodwinked me. And now here's Cassian, this guy I hate, but wait, do I hate him? And, I thought that maybe he could be turned at that point. Like he hesitated on killing Cassian. Like he could have pulled that trigger. But then we were talking about this episode with Mike Celestino on his podcast, Who's the Boss? And he was like, well, he said that Cassian telling him, "Who are you?" is what gives him pause because he doesn't know anymore. He thought he knew who he was an hour ago, but now, who are you? He doesn't know. So I don't know. What are your interpretations of that moment?
I felt like he just was getting everything pulled out from under him. He's built this sort of like world and he has this foe in his mind. And then he realizes his foe doesn't even know who he is. And earlier Rylance had said to him, the leader of the Gore resistance had said, what kind of being would do this, right, to him? And so like all these things are just like kind of crumbling down. And that's like the last thing. The person you've built up in your mind that you think is your opponent doesn't even know who you are. They don't even know that you exist, that you have a name. And it just reduces him to like nothing. And I actually watched the actor discuss this on StarWars.com. So that, and the thing is, you can interpret it. You don't need the actor's interpretation. He's obviously doing it something. And when you put it out into the universe, it can become something else, or the editor can make it something else. But I go with that sort of his mindset of that it just, everything's crumbling. He loses. He's just like literally deflated. It's like poking like a balloon with a needle, and he's just like, shoo, and he just loses purpose.
How was that word again?
Shoo. Yeah, that's how he lowers the gun.
Yeah.
He's holding and he lowers the gun. And that's what's kind of that moment for a second, exactly what you said, is you could interpret it as maybe he's thinking about it differently and then he's dead.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter what he thought all of a sudden. It's just done. It's not even like a shot to the shoulder. I mean, they're just like headshot. You're
right to the head. Right to the head. Oh my God. Wow. So yeah, that, I mean, it's just so great. And that said, I feel like if you haven't already, watch the show again with subtitles, because it really helps you grasp more of the story, especially if you're like me and you're like, ooh, costumes, ooh, hair, ooh, production design. Like, you forget that there's actual dialogue because there's just so much going on.
Really great dialogue.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's
fantastic.
It's just like witty and quick, and like even when they're doing exposition, it's smart in how they do it. And yeah, you pick up a lot more information. I'm going to agree with you totally. I didn't watch it all with subtitles the first time, but since then I tend to keep them on because there's so much happening. And even like the little descriptors, in the hospital episode when Clea's taking the little alien grandma and she puts her in the room, it says Granny scatting.
Well, yeah. And then also, I think in the Gorman Massacre episode, you hear the voices at the beginning and it says Gorman Anthem, opera or something like that. So yeah,
great descriptions. It's great. I just appreciate that you can watch this over and over and see more. And that's always been my take on the original trilogy, I've watched it hundreds of times. The prequel trilogy, hundreds of times. And I really like when you can watch something and get new things every time, or new parallels, or how characters are having diverging arcs or parallel arcs, or they're repeating things, stuff like that. So it just makes it really, I don't know, fun to watch. I've had a blast watching the storytellers discuss telling the story as well. And, you know, Tony Gilroy reminds me very much of Matt Stover. He knows all the rules so that he can break them. And I remember going to Celebration 3 and listening to Matt Stover talk about writing the Revenge of the Sith novelization, which I think is the best Star Wars book that there is. And he just knew all the rules and of storytelling, and Tony Gilroy is the same way. And even when they talked to all the other writers that worked on it, he came in with this Bible, and they're like, oh yeah, that was like, why did you pick to do this? They're like, oh, that was already in the outline, this 200-page outline that was given to them.
Wow.
And not to say that they didn't bring things in, they all did, but you know, and Gilroy's commitment is to dialogue and characterization, no matter what happens. And I think sometimes in Star Wars, there's a little bit more commitment to plot or sticking in
action
canon.
Scenes sometimes, you know,
exactly.
like action showpieces.
Yeah. And there's great action sequences in Andor, but all of them pertain to moving the character in some way. It, like Cyril's great big fight, that's full of so much emotional energy. It's a great fight because of the emotion in it, and because it's choreographed well, but the emotion in it makes it work.
Yeah, even the Gorman Massacre itself, Tony Gilroy mentioned that was Cyril's episode. And there is that moment in the massacre scene that everything pauses and you see Cyril in the middle of that plaza with bolts flying around him. And it just like the camera moves around him in this slow motion shot where that's where his world is crumbling. That's the centerpiece of that whole massacre, is not people dying, but like his actual character arc changing.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening is actually really horrific, and they're trying to relate to you through two other characters that survive it. And Cassian's hiding. He's like staying behind columns and trying to still do his mission, which is really hard. And Cyril's just out there in the wide open. But interestingly, he's not moving. As you said, he's just turning in a circle. And I think if he had run somewhere, he would have become a target. It's that he's staying in place and just sort of witnessing it all, that you can see what's happening to all these other characters and all the lives that are being lost. And functionally, he pretty much survives it until he decides to go after Cassian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oof.
I'm so pleased with this show, and I'll keep watching it. I'll watch it over and over again, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we'll find new things. We should watch it in a year and be like, okay, Andor, back. What do we notice this time?
Oh, I'll definitely be watching it in a year, and watch it again and watch Rogue One. And it's funny because Rogue One's not really one of my favorite movies. I mean, it's one of the better Disney era movies, but it's not one of my favorite Star Wars movies. And that's really because Jin's story is sort of a struggle in it. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, now it's Cassian's story. I'm like, no, it's still Jin's story, but even I've seen Gilroy say, yeah, it was on TV and I was afraid to watch it, but I watched parts of it and held it pretty well. He can only do so much with that story. He's coming in, I think he has like a 12-week run to try to essentially rewrite it and reshoot it. He let it slip that he had to beg Donnie Yen to come back to do reshoots. Like that, you know, there's little things he slips out in interviews that if you listen to all of them, you're like, wow, he was really struggling. You know, he's begging people to come back into the studio and do stuff. So I think this fixes the problems that he knew existed in Rogue One. If you're a writing person, you know that Jin's story's just sort of flat in Rogue One, but it works because his conceit that he figured out was it doesn't matter because they all die. It doesn't matter what's motivating them because they all die. And it's I mean, it's a really smart storytelling fix to a problem that he had. And
Right.
so that's why he gets paid the good bucks. I mean, he said it. He's like, fixing movies is where you make your money because they're desperate and you get paid by the week. And I can't remember, he made some like astronomical fee for doing those fixes on
Wow.
Rogue One because they were in a crunch. They had and it worked out. I mean, they made $1 billion, so it's good.
And it's many people's favorite of the Star Wars era.
It is.
I know that.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I think the most important thing is that Rogue One's ending works.
Right.
And, you know, some of the stuff in the beginning is where it struggles, but at the end it works. And, you know, that's the most important thing in storytelling is knowing how to finish something.
Yeah.
What do you think should be the takeaway from the critical success for this show as what should Star Wars take away from this?
Like what should Lucasfilm or Star Wars learn from it?
Yeah.
Well, Tony Gilroy had time to plan out this whole show, season 1 to season 2. It all flows. It all, you know, he took writers in a room and mashed it out and figured out the long game. So I feel like that Star Wars should learn to plan out shit. They should take a note from Darth Sidious's book. What would Darth Sidious do? Oh, let's clone myself way back here so that way down the line I can come back. Or take over the Senate eventually and gather control of the banks here and gather control of this war here. And yeah, they just need to plan out stuff. And once something is planned out, then everything in that thing can be in service to the story that's planned out, and you can have this moment of complete fulfillment like we had at the end of Andor.
It's like going to a fine meal.
Yes.
You know, you there's some investment in time, but at the end you feel satisfied and whole. I feel like a lot of people are still saying that this means, you know, OC stories are where it's at for storytelling.
What do you mean by OC?
OC, original characters, or, you know, not the mainline Skywalkers, that non-Force stories are important, although they did make sure to tie this into sort of the Force lore in a way. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But I think the lesson is to have a good vision and to want to say something. Star Wars is successful because George Lucas had a point of view. He was well read, and all this stuff that he threw into the story is stuff that he was well read on myth, on history, on you know, politics, the current events that happened in the past. And here comes Tony Gilroy, who gets this chance. He's passionate about history, about revolution, about history that repeats itself. And Star Wars and where he got to play is like a perfect canvas for him. He had something to say, and he had a point of view on what's happening in the world, all over the world, all the time. And he put that, infuse that into the story, and that's what makes it work, on top of him being a really good storyteller and knowing all the rules. And if you listen to them talk about the storytelling, all the writers, anybody who worked on it, it's just how hard they worked on it. You know, Dan Gilroy said he'd get up at 4 a.m. and write until 8 p.m.
Wow.
And I think people don't realize how hard they worked on this show. And, you know, people think, oh, I worked a hard 8-hour day. They are working for, you know, 15, 16 hours a day to get this done, type of thing. Really, really long days. But sometimes that's kind of what you have to do to push like this type of creative content out.
Oh, yeah. Like once you're in that creative zone, you don't want to leave it. I mean, I know that feeling too. You know, like after dinner, if you're like into something creatively, oh, you just work till midnight. It's no problem because you're in that zone. So I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to be a little manic sometimes to be creative.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's the reverse side of that happens too, when you're just like, woo, I spent it all up.
Yeah, that's true. Burnout. All right. So let's go back to some of the things that we brought up last time. And we talked about costumes in the last 6 episodes. So was there anything else specific that stuck out in these new episodes for you?
One of the things that I brought up was blue as the color of the rebellion. So I hope if people listen to the last episode that the blue really stood out to them in the final 6 episodes. Even simple things like the maintenance workers, the 2 women that locked the communication down in the Senate. It's little acts of resistance, but they're dressed in blue. And I know that's a Senate color, but they're choosing to put them in blue as well. And, these are Nemec's ideas, small acts of resistance. They're like, we're just following the bureaucratic rules that say this door must be locked.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah. And we put the key upstairs. And that guy's face, oh my God. He was so upset because he knew he was going to get it.
Yep.
And what I noticed in this, the final arc especially, was yellow. So Clea dons the yellow uniform of nurses in the hospital, and yellow in Star Wars often means protector. Like the yellow lightsaber is the color of the Jedi Temple Guards, and their job is to protect the temple guards. And here the yellow is the nurse's uniform, and Clea dons this color to infiltrate the hospital, but ironically she's not there to protect Luthen, she's there to kill him. However, by doing so, she protects the rebellion and all its secrets, including the secret of the hidden base, Yavin.
Yeah, she's protecting what he wanted to happen. He had already chosen that. So, yeah.
Yes.
And even the doctor that first talks to Dedra is in the yellow also, and she's trying to protect all her patients. And that, she sort of like stands up and resists. And then she's like, well, you don't want us to move your patients. You'll do a better job. And all the yellow is really an interesting color in that sort of, because it's just different and sort of blends in but doesn't in the white of everything.
And it's different than that mustard yellow that we get on Mina Rao. The mustard yellow is more earthy toned, whereas this
kind of
yellow
like a sun, like like
it was
the
a sun
healing
yellow
of the sun. Yeah,
exactly. One other color that really stood out to me was Cyril is in his grays, or his dark gray to black almost, and yet on Gorman he's in this gorgeous brown. And I wondered, what does that mean to you?
I think he's straying away from the black and white rigidity of the Empire. He's already in the gray early on, and this is him trying to find and fit in, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is more of a Gorman color.
Oh yeah, he's definitely trying to fit in with the Gore people. One, because of what he thinks his assignment is to find outside agitators, and 2, I think he just wants to belong. Yeah.
Aww.
Tony Gilroy said that Cyril is like the most romantic character, and he didn't mean that in like, he does have a romance, but in that he has hopes and visions, that the scene where he's sitting in his mom's apartment with his action figures looking out at I think it's a sunset, it's just him like imagining possibilities. And so it's really tragic what happens to him, because he says he makes bad choices. It's not all that bad things happen to him. He makes bad choices on his own.
That is true. And no wonder I'm so drawn to Cyril. He's like my favorite character. He's the most romantic. Oh, and I see that. I know what that means. Like romantic and he's also that typical, like it's such a satisfying tragedy that he's killed. Like I hate that he's killed, but I love it too, because it's just a good tragic ending. And all of plays are the comedy and the tragedy, and you love that tragedy as long as it's not happening to you.
It's sad that, well, he's part of this process that shows that this empire, that fascism eats people up. It chews them up and spits them out, and you just end up a corpse of a person dead somewhere. He was instrumental in the empire's success on
Gorman.
And there he is, just dead with a headshot. Which is what they did to those poor young troops that they brought in.
Yes.
and march them out into there, and then their sniper, shoots one of them with a headshot to start the whole kind of fray happening on the square. And yeah, it's sad. And then, just off of that costume idea, Dedra actually looking like she's being suffocated by her own, she keeps pulling at the collar of her neck, as from when he chokes her on, you see her again pull at the collar of her neck, and then later episodes when it's all messing up with Luthen, she again pulls her collar, like the Empire's literally choking the life out of her, but she's still committed to it.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm putting this together because in earlier episodes, Cyril, his mother makes a point of saying, oh, what did you do with your collar? He's like, oh, I raised it. He wants to be part of the Empire. So he raised that collar so he could be a part of it. So yeah.
Yeah, he's cosplaying it.
Absolutely. So should we talk about production design in storytelling?
Yes, because we talked about it in our last episode. It was one of the things that we brought up, just as far as things that were really impressing us. To me, the Senate building itself is just such a great set piece, and so is the hospital, because the characters are moving up and down in those elevators and on the stairs. And for Mon Mothma particularly, and Cassian in the Senate episode, they're moving up the elevators and then down the stairs and down the elevators to their destiny. Clea, the same thing. When she has to go through the hospital, she moves up to her choice with Luthen, and then, escapes back down. You see less of her escaping down, but I just love the designs and the hospital as well, how you can see like one side of the hospital from the other side of the hospital. So you can see, like, what's his name, Hirt, coming in to confront Dedra.
She saw which floor to go to because she saw the ISB officers in that handily windowed elevator.
Yes.
Yeah. Going up. It's like, oh, okay. They're going to the 27th floor.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I just love how the design sort of shows where the characters are mentally in the story itself.
Yeah, and Clea could really plan out what she was doing because of that, even down to she could see her bombs on the car go off as the distraction so that she could infiltrate as well. That's, wow, so smart. I love it.
Yep.
I really love, the ISB set design, that room that all the supervisors meet in, that looks kind of like either the inside of the Death Star or the inside of Epcot Spaceship Earth. It totally has.
I do the Epcot, Epcot Spaceship Earth, yeah.
It's absolutely Epcot. And throughout this whole series, it's always been shown as bustling. You have all these ISB supervisors lining the walls, and the room is filled with all these people trying to keep control of the galaxy. But that room, it ends with only Partagaz by himself in that giant room. And before that, there's a scene in it where Partagaz is talking to Krennic and Hirt, Supervisor Hirt, and it's just the three men, filling that space with Clea's giant head in the middle, like separating them. I thought that was a great mise-en-scène. And then, so going back to Partagaz's final moments, Krennic had mentioned that it's the ISB Death March happening. Yep. And it's really taken a toll on the Empire. And so finally you get to that room and it's just Partagaz. And yeah, he effed up, or at least he's getting the blame for Clea escaping. And he kills himself in there. Wow.
One, you can imagine either they know that they're getting marched to the Emperor or Darth Vader, that's sort of in the lore, or that he's fearing a fate like Dedra's, which is in a Narkina jail cell.
Absolutely.
So whatever it is he's afraid of, he's not going to face it. He'd rather just, end it. And
yes,
up until that point, he's just such a brilliant character. He's playing the game as hard as he can.
He's also a great mentor too. Like he's a really good boss. No, I mean, it's sad that he's on the wrong side, but he's a really good boss.
He has great lines.
bad for him.
Calibrate your enthusiasm.
Oh, I've seen so many memes now and I love them. I love them. I just want to talk about him for a minute because some of our conversations throughout Fangirls Going Rogue really informed how I watched some of this. And you know how we always talk about selflessness versus selfishness. And usually it's the Jedi displaying selflessness and the Sith displaying selfishness. Well, Partagaz and Luthen have the same fate. They both take their own lives, or at least try to. But Partagaz, the reason he takes his life is selfishness, because he does not want to suffer that fate. He's like, he was at the top of his game. He's good. And Luthen, he takes his own life for selflessness, because he knows that if he's interrogated his secrets, he knows everything about the rebellion. So I thought that was a really fun way of taking this series that's so grounded and dovetailing it into the Star Wars lore.
I mean, it's a great thing is you see characters like that having parallel paths, but making different choices, and that at the end, Partagaz is listening to Nemec's manifesto being read, right down to the end. And what does he say to the other guy? Have you heard it? And he says parts of it, right? But he's listening to the whole of it before he makes that choice. Sort of like he's saying, maybe I made the wrong choice, and you don't know. He was probably part of the Republic,
yes,
before it became the Empire. But he chose to do what he's doing, and we don't know all his motivations. But you see a hint of regret, maybe, in him listening to that.
I definitely see that, yeah, and I also think that informs his choice to kill himself, because, the manifesto is saying that the Empire leaks, it breaks, and the rebellion will be happening everywhere. So he can only see it getting worse. He can never see himself winning.
They're obviously struggling with it, right? The death marches, all these of the ISBs, all these failures that they're having, because it's just becoming too much for them to contain. And as you noted, like the parallels with Luthen struggling with too much information as well. Like they're all struggling with sort of like there's too much to contain. So something has to happen, right? That's why, either the Death Star succeeds or the rebellion succeeds, but we're in this like kind of right before the volcano erupts, essentially, and they're having trouble containing it.
We're in the end game.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to say about the set design?
No, but I did want to hear your thoughts on the music of this show. I would probably could do a whole episode on that alone.
Yeah. I mean, later on, if we want to, I have been listening to the soundtrack, the score, but I haven't been able to dig in as much as I want, but I do have 2 points I want to bring up here. Because I know this episode is all about these 5 women, and we haven't even gotten to that yet. Yep. So let me bring up my 2 points of the music. So first of all, did you listen through the credits of the final episode?
Yes.
Okay.
That was after I saw some people point it out. I didn't originally. Yeah.
Tricia. I always listen through the credits. Yes, shame. All right. Well, the Andor theme turns into the Star Wars main theme halfway through the credits, and I loved it. Like, it just brings it home, And I saw online that some people were disappointed knowing that there was an Easter egg in the end credits and then saying, oh, is it just the music? Dude, what are they smoking? The music is telling the story here, that the rebellion and Luke and A New Hope would not happen unless all the events of Andor happened. So these one leads into the other. The Andor theme leads into the Star Wars main theme. And it's lovely.
It is.
I love that. And then there was a fun nugget in the Andor Declassified in the final arc from composer Brandon Roberts. And he mentioned that the music starts more electronic in this season, with tracks like Niamos, with tracks like when Cassian is stealing that TIE whatever That whole track is very electronic, but then the tracks gradually become more orchestral over the season. I mean, the Gormans themselves, that's a whole episode in itself, how they have opera. They're a very upstanding society. They have opera, they have choir. And then so that finally, in that final montage, when Cassian is walking toward his destiny in that final episode 12, then it's all a beautiful orchestral suite. And it really lines up with that Rogue One score that Michael Giacchino composed.
And it makes sense structurally for the story because you're building the rebellion. So you have all these little pieces. It's like you have the horns in one part of the galaxy, and you have the flutes, maybe the woodwinds in another part of the galaxy. And they're finally sort of getting together and have their conductor potentially, with some leaders so that there can be an orchestra at the end.
I love that. Aw.
I know these composers think of things, in their head. They're so smart.
They are. They really are. All right. Well, let's kick off our 5 women discussion. And I think you need to read Tony Gilroy's quote from Andor Declassified.
Well, before I read it, I'm going to say that I messaged Sarah and I said, I think I know what we need to talk about. And she messaged back, 5 women. And that was it.
The 5 women at the end of the show is really what the show's kind of about. It's the victory, it's the pain, it's the life that these 5 women have had. It really gives the show, I think, its ultimate punch at the end, dramatically.
Now, he never specifies who those 5 women are, but I think it's obvious that it's Bix, Mon, Vel, Clea, and Dedra, even though she has a tragedy.
Right. Yeah, it is the women who are seen as Cassian's walking toward his destiny. And, they cut to various parts of the galaxy, and it's these 5 women. So.
And Perrin.
And
Perrin.
And the mother-in-law.
He's still, living his life, drinking it up.
He's philandering. He's what did Tony Gilroy call him? He's the hedonist of our story.
Yes. He's still he's still in his hedonism.
Yes. Oh my God. All right. So let's talk about Clea, who is played by Elizabeth Dulau. And if you've been paying attention on social media this week, this was her first main gig outside of acting school. Wow.
I know. That's pretty crazy. And apparently there were 2 big name actresses who had this part, and they both begged to back out. They had other things.
Do we know who they were?
No, they don't. I wish I know who they were, and they're probably regretting it at this point. But then the casting director said, well, I have this woman, and he was like, oh, I'll run with it. I'll go with it. It's one of those things that she was a nobody until she's not.
Right. Absolutely.
She would have been a perfect Leia too.
Yes. Yeah. She's got the nose shit, the face, the nose. Yeah. People are talking about that, which is why I think, so you mentioned early on in season 1 that she could have been a handmaiden from Naboo. There is that episode where she wears that red jacket with the little hood thing that comes up, and she looks so amazing. It's like, oh, look, that's like a handmaiden look. And I couldn't get that image out of my head. So that was my headcanon this whole time. Thanks to you. Thanks a lot. And of course, as we know, handmaidens from Naboo are capable, no-nonsense women that get things done.
Yeah, there was sort of, to me, a little nod to it when she does up her hair before she goes to the hospital. To me, that felt very back to, that's why I could see getting the handmaiden vibe. And crazy enough, we go to Naboo for her first act of true terrorism.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you, what do you make of the moment where Luthen says, okay, it's your choice to press the button to blow up some stuff and people, too. And she's about to do it, but he takes the remote away. What do you make of that?
He's stuck in this mindset that he doesn't want her to lose her childhood, even though she already has. He's still trying to protect her, because he's failed miserably. So it's one of those, he failed miserably, and he's talking about he didn't realize he had a choice to say no to the horrible things he's done. And what she's saying is no to the atrocities of the Empire, but they're doing it in a different way, right? As opposed to just, you can't just say no because they might shoot you. So you have to skulk around and do spycraft and all this stuff. And what he makes the point of, we're going to lose until we win. And that's essentially true. What happens? They just keep losing. People die. They lose information. Even when he acknowledges that, we have to lose Gorman. We have to lose a place like Gorman for somebody like Mon Mothma to stand up and say the Emperor's bad. So it's losses. He accepts that Ferrix is going to go down, that Gorman's going to go down, that other places will fall before people stand up and say, no, we don't accept this.
Yeah. I also feel like he's protecting her innocence, what little she has.
I don't think there's any left.
I know. Yeah. No, I agree.
She was in the first season sort of there. She was assistant. And I think that's the point, right? We were supposed to really be not assuming about her. And also the actress earned herself a bigger part.
Yes.
They say that they were like, hey, there's a lot we could do with her. It's really interesting to make a choice to do a bottle episode about her and Luthen right after that big run with the Gorman massacre and Mon Mothma's Senate speech and escape, because there is what do you do after that? You just go straight into what's happening? No, they sort of like go kind of let you take a moment and learn why Luthen is who he is, and really that Clay is the one who's been driving this whole thing the whole time. He's just like the mentor who's like sharpening her skills, but she's like, she is the Force. She's the one who goes and's like, I'm not going to look away when these people get executed. I'm going to stand there and look at it. He's like, nah. I think the name of the episode is Make It Stop, which is what he says over and over and over again. And it's not until he sees Clea that he actually chooses to do something to make it stop.
Yeah, the two really help each other survive as long as they have. And Luthen wouldn't have become the revolutionary he is without Clea. And I find that so interesting. In season 1, we did get a glimmer of who Clea was when Vel comes into the shop, and she and Vel are talking, and Vel is all proud. I gave him Aldani. She's all proud of herself that she gave all this money for the revolution, and Clea just kind of puts her in her place and says, I don't have sometimes, I have always. And how she's always on hand. She's always receiving messages. She's always there. She never has a moment's break. She's given up her life, any love, any kind of thing to this rebellion, just like Luthen has.
Yeah, she's a singular purpose. There's like absolute focus from her. And Luthen sort of takes that direction from her and what he's going to do with his life. It's like almost like he needed like a North Star, and she's this is where we're going. We know that we're not going to deny that bad things happen, and I think her witnessing the executions itself is kind of what makes her keep going. Like, yes, if we have to do bad things, we have to do bad things because they're doing bad things, and in her mindset. And I mean, what do they say when they are analyzing before they get the footage of the hospital attack? They're like, there must be 3 infiltrators.
We think there's 3 people. And then, they run the footage and run it back and back and back. It's like, no, there's only 1. And she comes in with her little hand bandaged up.
Which is a parallel to when she injured her hand in to get the listening device. It's mirroring that she literally just dug that thing and used her bones to turn it when she had to get it done. Great scene as well. She's playing off, knowing what's happening with Mon Mothma and Krennic having their little banter fest. She's watching Lonnie to make sure he's in the line of sight and controlling Lonnie and trying to do something to pretend like she's not doing something at the same time. Crazy sequence. And it's amazing how they made that play out.
Yes, there was an image of her and Luthen coming to that party, Davos Golden's party, where she's in that beautiful blue cape and dress, and Luthen is all dressed up too. And I think Tati Perez, one of our listeners, she like sent the picture to Richard and I, was like, "You guys gonna cosplay?" It's like, okay, I want to cosplay as Kalea. That would be amazing.
It's a very like simple dress.
Yes,
but that one too is like the brightest blue we see her in. Otherwise, she's in that really deep, almost to dark blue that sort of gives her an edge. That you should be scared of her.
She's a bad girl. She's like Cinta, you know. Oof.
Yeah, she's a bad girl. Don't mess with her.
Mm-mm.
Love that. I also love, like, there's an interesting dynamic between Clea and Cassian now knowing what she's been through, and because we see it before we see the backstory, is when Cassian's like, nah, I'm done after this. When he gets to Coruscant and they're going to send him in to get Mon Mothma, and he's like, after this, I'm done. And it's hard to appreciate because Cassian just sort of witnesses all that of the massacre. It's still happening to him, but it's almost, you kind of are, he's numb and you're numb from it. And we know that she listened to the massacre of her people and then has witnessed the execution of people. And she's like, you're a witness to a massacre. How could this not drive you to do whatever you could to stop it? And that she's literally telling on herself in that moment. But until you rewatch it, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
That's her story. Why can't you do this? This is what I'm doing. Why can't you be like me?
Right. Yeah, because he's got Bix. He's been pulled in some different directions at that point.
Why do you think she's so reluctant to go to Yavin?
So that's a hard question. I mean, so I feel like she and Luthen, they stayed on Coruscant, and anyone who's a rebel has kind of fled to Yavin. And so, well, she says they've stayed too long. And I feel like she thinks that she can't fit in there. Like she's lost her home with Luthen. She doesn't, and she's lived with him so long since she was an impressionable child that she can't conceive of building a new life in a new place. And I think maybe that's what she's afraid of. She's not afraid of Yavin specifically. She's just afraid of trying to build a new life. Like she was ready to just kind of give herself up and die there in that hovel on Coruscant. And she was like, here, take this information, go, just leave me. So I think she's afraid of building a new life.
Yeah. It's so interesting to see her play it, where she's like Yavin. She's like, you could see like her whole body like tenses up, like, ugh, like, don't make me go there.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a kid going to a new school vibe, like,
yeah. Well, and then I love the dynamic between her and Vel, because we only have a total of 3 scenes together with them, I think, right? The first is in season 1 where they're at odds. And then season 2, they see each other in not Coruscant, Chandrila at the party. And they have kind of words, and they're seen in the doorway, but they both go separate ways out of that doorway, still not together. But Vel is the one who shows Clea some compassion and kind of some sisterly love. Like, oh, you have a home and a community here if you want it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. One thing I'm just going to note to wrap up Clea's discussion is they really hard go with the colors on her, and the blue that she's in almost the whole time, that dark blue. And when she's a child, when Luther first meets her, she's in red. And then when she witnesses the execution of the people, she's in blue. back to that deep blue with some gold in it. And then she goes back to red in her outfit on Naboo when she becomes, when they first initiate their rebellion, essentially. And red is the color of motherhood. So in essence, I think she's symbolically a mother of the Rebel Alliance, just because her and Luthen are like, they're so into early on in this rebellion that, she's not the whole mother, but I think there is this idea of part of her has helped create this.
Nice. Wow. I love that.
Yeah. I would do a Clea. I would put writers on it and do a Clea TV show. I think you could do Clea and Vel like in a spycraft. There's still a lot of things that have to be done type of show. I could do it.
I think that would be great. Well, should we talk about someone who becomes a mother in this series?
Yes.
Bix, played by Adria Arjona. And I mean, throughout this season, she's really Cassian's love. They've been together since they were 9, on and off, of course, but now they realize, we are meant to be together. And like, now here she is, and we see her at the end of the series, and she has a little baby. What did you think about that?
I knew that's the way it was going to end.
You did?
Yeah.
Wasn't a surprise?
No, I felt like they had to find something hopeful. And if I were writing, that would be where I would go. You just, like they did it, you had to be careful with it, and they had to extract her. And they found a way to do that. You had to be careful how you do it. But I felt like that was going to be the inevitable hopefulness of Cassian's fate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So let's sidestep and talk about what they did to extract her from the story. Because I got scared. So I was listening to her and Cassian talking, and Cassian wanted to leave the rebellion. And he can't leave the rebellion because Rogue One exists. And so I was like, oh no, they're going to have to kill off Bix. Like I was so sure they were going to do that. And yet they introduced this Force healer. And so the Force healer is the one who, senses Cassian, senses that Cassian has been carrying all this with him for a higher purpose. And Bix says that she has kind of had dreams about this too. And so the Force healer is the one that really confirms Bix's thoughts that Cassian is meant for the revolution. He's meant for something more. And so I feel like that was what spurred her to make her choice in leaving Cassian. So, okay, when you go back and watch this season after you know that Bix had a baby, there's a moment when she's talking to the Force healer after Cassian has left, and the camera dips down to the healer holding Bix's hand near her abdomen. And at the point, the Force healer is saying, maybe you're where he's supposed to be, carrying all this stuff with him. And I think she's pregnant at that point, and that the healer can obviously sense that life. What do you think?
I would say that's a reasonable take on what they were trying to do. Because you have to decide, when is she pregnant, and the baby's not. Baby's definitely not teeny weeny.
Yeah.
When we see her at the end, so it's not like it's a little baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think she would probably have had to have known something.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like she knew at that point, because then when Cassian comes back from his mission extracting Mon, that's when, they have one night together, and then Bix leaves her message. Because I feel like she had to leave before Cassian knew that she was pregnant, even before she had the baby, obviously, because if he knew she was pregnant, he would choose her, and he would, not go with the rebellion.
Well, she says, I can't face you because you'll talk me out of it.
Yes.
She knows she has a hard time.
And as a person, I totally understand that. I had a boyfriend in college, like he would talk me around, just like she said. Like, and so I would literally make notes for conversations I wanted to have.
I'm
with
sticking
him.
to my
And
points.
read the letter to him like out loud, because I didn't, because he turned into a lawyer. So like, yeah, I couldn't compete.
There's a couple interesting things about the healer character itself, because she's not necessarily supposed to be a Jedi who's
Right.
there. She's like selling like food, or she's a cook. She has some force skills, I think more kind of like a, what is his name? John Narwood from Skeleton Crew, where has some abilities and might be a little bit of a shady character even. So Tony Gilroy said he based her on Whoopi Goldberg's character in the movie Ghost, which is Oda Mae Brown. And he talked about this on the Backstory podcast, which is really good discussions with all the writers. But he's talking about this idea of, right, the Whoopi's character in that is sort of like, you know, she's a charlatan, but then Patrick Swayze's ghost can talk to her. And so the whole thing is like trying to get the message to the woman he loves, played by Demi Moore. And then Demi starts to believe it, but then she realizes this character is sort of a fraudster. So it's like, how do you get the truth to her? And so, but the character, the healer, sort of is like, does have some ability. And when she meets Cassian, she senses some purpose, and her relaying that to him makes Bix like this true believer that he does have some type of destiny. And Tony Gilroy says that he is this sort of like reluctant hero of destiny. He's, you know, that's a very mythic type of thing where you have these characters that don't really want to do it. And he also even calls them sort of a messianic character, which would, you know, be like essentially a Jesus character. He says, you know, there's a very much a reluctant destiny character that's big in storytelling, and he's talking about Jesus. So the idea is that he's a chosen one to do something, that there's so many places Cassian's been that there must be something higher working to make him be in these places, and that the Force needs a way to tell Bix that he needs to keep doing this.
Right. Because she's the one who can turn his head. She's the woman. She's the neck. Okay,
yeah.
Turn your head.
And in some ways, if you were going to look at it from storytelling, the Force might reward her with a child to
carry on.
Yeah.
It's
kind of this like karmic destiny if you act on behalf of the whatever this power. And it makes sense because I talked about in our last episode that she's in the red. I was trying to like tiptoe around that because we knew she would be a mother.
Yes.
But they're signaling it really hard that that's sort of where, you know, she's happy on Mina Rao. Mm-hmm. It makes sense that that's where she goes back to. It's a place where she's found her community and that kind of stuff. And it's interesting in that the character, you know, makes this choice to just say, yeah, what you need to do is more important than what I need. And it's cool because she makes her speech. Mon Mothma makes her speech. They both choose the rebellion in the same episode. They both make that choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the same. Wow. And of course Bix is mostly in that red the whole time, this whole series, like on Mina Rao at the beginning, she's got that red, like tunic.
And she's in blue on Yavin with a green, she has a green undershirt and a blue kind of over tunic that she wears. It's that rebel blue. But what's interesting is how that house they're in, that they're building together, is so different from that brutalistic apartment that they're in on Coruscant that feels so cold. She keeps trying to make it warm. And then they're in this like really naturey, we have those elegant round openings in their place that ends up framing them like the rebel symbol, interestingly enough. But she's growing all these plants and she's in green. That's where you kind of get this like Mother Nature thing from her, that she's like into the Force. They frame her sitting with Cassian and all the plants are in that circular thing that she's made the shelves. And then when you see Cassian leaving before he goes off to meet Tivik at the end, he's watering the plants.
Yes.
So some people are like freaking out. That's so mean. And I'm like, but it's just a way for the storytellers to tell you where his brain is. Like, he's not going to meet Tivik thinking he's going to die. He thinks he's going to come back. If you thought you were going to die, you'd never water the plants.
No, he's just choosing life in that moment. He's being a force for good, for life, rather than letting his plants wither and die.
Yeah.
Like Dedra does.
I do like Bix's, the arc of her, seeing her in the trauma, seeing her work her way out of the trauma. I mean, for her, it's, the act of killing Gorse that does it for her. But, when like Cassian comes back from the Gorman massacre, she knows like what he's feeling. And he's like, are you arguing with me? She's like, no, I'm listening. Like, that's what you just need, right? When you're in the space of trauma, is just someone to listen to you. But at the same time, she has to be like, yeah, that's your trauma and you want to step out of it, but I'm not going to let you step out of it with me, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going back to that, when she kills Gorst at the end of episode 6, and when she's walking away from that building and they, set off the bomb, the music track that's playing is called The Bix Is Back. Which I think is great. That's awesome. And also I have a little nitpick with the series.
Yes.
So, when Gorst comes into the room, he's like so happy. He's carrying his little dessert in the little container and he puts it on the desk. And then Bix comes out of the shadows, and puts him in the torture chamber. And she doesn't take the container. She doesn't take that cupcake. And I'm so sad because that's a dessert gone to waste. And that's just no good.
Apparently Tony Gilroy wanted her to take a bite out of the cupcake and he got vetoed that was too cruel. But I like the idea of just walking off with it. Like, yes. I killed you and I'm going to take my cupcake
Take your dessert too.
It's like the ultimate bully move.
Right? That would be amazing. So yeah, I can see how they would veto eating the cupcake, but just take it. It's already packaged.
It looks so good and yummy.
It did.
It's so funny because Tony Gilroy's like, yeah, I really wanted her to take a bite of that cupcake and I got vetoed. He also really wanted Cassian to say, who are you? And everybody else didn't want that to happen. And I think that's one of the best moments in the whole show is like, who are you?
I think so too. Because it makes him take pause. Like, yeah, it's great.
Exactly.
I love it.
So let's go from our nurturers and women who have mothered and created rebellions and kept people on their paths in the rebellion and kept their destiny, to Dedra, who's like chaos lady.
Okay, if Dedra was in Harry Potter universe, she would be a Slytherin. She has total ambition to the detriment of everyone else around her. And I just have to say that she has the best frowny, disgusted look. The way her lip goes, it's like a completely upside down smile. And Denise Goff, the actress herself, talked about here.
My mother said to me once, she'll kill me for saying this, but she said to me once, Nisi, you have to smile because otherwise you look very sour. And then when I got this part and when it came out, there's a picture of Dedra. In my family, we call it the downturny mouth. Mm. And so I sent her a picture of Dedra with the downturny mouth.
Oh my, yeah.
And I said, who's laughing now? Because it's made my career. So it's a good thing I didn't smile all the time. But this season, even I watched it and I was like, oh, Denise, come on. How much further down can your face go? So in my real life, I try to keep everything pretty and nice because I do not look pretty this season at all.
I just find that hilarious. It's like this thing that she had as a little kid is now used to full advantage here. There's a moment when she's in the Gorman Plaza. She goes out on that balcony and just her look, her disgusted look and that little upside down smile, her frown is just perfect. amazing.
Yeah. I mean, she's so Imperial. I just love that she plays his character and she talks about it, that you shouldn't like her. Like, you can appreciate what's happening to her, but you're not supposed to like her. She is true believer on the other side here. She's the opposite of Bix. It's all about ambition and what's in it for me and not being selfless. It's about, I mean, they even talk about here, it says, maybe they gave me the axes because I don't want the glory. Like, he says to her, like, everybody knows you're in this for you, for the glory. But she wraps it up in this idea of the empire, and it, saved me, and I was in my Kinderblock, and they raised me, and we need order. But she really is the agent of chaos in everything.
And she acts so much like rebels too. I've had to be a scavenger, right? That's what the rebels are. They scavenge for those pieces of Imperial parts, that Imperial Starpath unit that was scavenged, right? And she's had to be a scavenger of information. And I love how she can think like they do. Even the ISB supervisors, Hirt, says to her, you think like them. What were they doing?
She could have been in the Rebel Alliance. I wondered if she would be the one who would turn. I like what they did with her in that she isn't turnable, that she's so embedded in this mindset, but that she's so close to that rebel mindset that Krennic even questions for a moment, like, you're like acting like a rebel, like all these things, your passcodes are, things are leaking, things that we don't want out. I mean, she's so close to that line.
Yeah. All the time.
There's parallels for her to Clea, right? They're both orphaned as young children. They're committed to their cause. She's the opposite. Like, she's a destroyer, chaos agent, as opposed to Bix, who's the nurturer. But one of the things that, to me, from the first time we saw her learn about what was going to happen on Gorman, potentially, up until the point where Pradagaz says, "Bad luck, Gorman," right? When he tells her that we are executing the plan, she's disgusted by it, but she still does it.
She doesn't do anything to stop it.
No, which is, different than Luthen. We see Luthen disgusted and finally makes a choice, but Dedra even at the end of the massacre, she's lost Cyril, obviously, when he comes in and confronts her. And then I think she's just disgusted by what's taken place, and we see her shaking. I mean, Denise Goff just does an amazing job with that moment of putting you in her shoes, where she's essentially lost everything.
Oh, yeah.
At the end. Yeah.
Yeah, when she's in that little padded room and she's shaking. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, where she takes those messages. I love that room, because it feels like the walls are closing in on her as she's getting the messages from Pardagaz, and they all sort of know she's losing it. Like, what does the guy say? I'm the trigger, you're the finger, and then that pulls the trigger, and and all this. Like, they all know that she's a little bit shaky on this, but they're there to kind of all prod her into doing it.
Right. And even in that moment when she's shaking, she probably knows at this point that Cyril has been killed. And this is the room where Pardagaz is always telling her that she's displaying too much emotion. Yep. When she hardly has any emotion on her face, he's like, too much emotion.
Too animated.
Yes. So she begins this whole scene. She's like crying, and her one hand is shaking. And she stops that shaking with her other hand, and then the camera goes back to her face. But then she finds that her hand is still shaking, and then she ends up embracing her shaking hand. It's like she's finally embracing her humanity in that moment. And it's just, it's so heartbreaking.
As a character, she got some great scenes. We have the confrontation with Luthen, which is like the dialogue in that scene is just, what does he say? Two pieces of questionable countenance in this room. He's talking about him and her, not
not any of the pieces, but he tactfully takes the piece that he can kill himself with, or her. I think at that point he takes that knife. He doesn't know who he's going to use it on. Yeah, but she displays this real smile. It's like, oh my gosh.
She's so excited. She's almost giddy about it.
She is. She pulls out that Star Path unit. You can almost hear her go, aha, I got you. But she's keeping it contained.
Yeah, the actress does a great job with that scene because she's just like slowly building the joy she's taking from this moment that she's found this purpose. Again, paralleling Clea, and she's in Clea's space, oddly enough, is that she has this like one purpose, which has been to find Axis, and she thinks she's doing it and she's succeeding, and this is gonna be her win, her glory, and it all just falls apart. Luthen, she underestimates them, like what they're willing to do. So she thinks like them, but not quite enough.
Right. Yeah, it's like, oh, he wouldn't kill himself. Yes, he would.
She also gets to act against Ben Mendelsohn's Krennic.
I love these scenes so much. Like, it's amazing. And from that first scene in that first episode to this final scene where he's interrogating her, and it's so weird how it's framed, right? Yeah, he's cut off. Krennic's head is cut off at the mouth, but he's directly behind her, and his cape is like framing them both. And I love, like, that just really demonstrates how he's the big bad in this scene, and his cape is framing it, and he's looming over her, just like in Star Wars posters where, you know, the Vader or the Emperor looms over our heroes. And I love that. But what do you take from cutting off Krennic's head at the mouth?
Well, that director makes a lot of choices like that where he doesn't show the whole part of the face. Mm-hmm. And I think he just wanted to be on her. Like, he wanted her reaction to be central. And there's a lot of choices in the whole show that when a character is in the center, they're very true to a moment for themselves. And so he wanted to be on her, and that meant that he had to cut the top of him off. But it's like creeps you out. And I think that's what it's supposed to do. It's like, it feels really icky.
Yeah. It's also, in my head, what I thought of at first was that she is looking at us. Krennic comes in behind her. She can't see him. She can't see his face. They don't show his whole face until she can see it in that scene. So it's also demonstrating that the scene is from her point of view. But I like your idea too. That just makes us creeped out too.
Well, in the way that she is. I mean, as you're saying it, like a lot of the things that director does specifically is sort of kind of creep you out. Like, he uses a lot of weird shots where the characters are really far into one side of a frame. So sometimes the characters aren't even in the center, not even at the little bit of the side. They're like way off to the side sometimes. So
I think like the Luthen, when he's talking to the ISB supervisor about the Death Star, right? Yeah. That scene is all cropped weird.
Yeah. And they're doing it on purpose. I think it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. And yeah, but that whole, just the room, the way they frame it, apparently Ben Mendelsohn like ad-libbed what I call the Krennic boop, when he puts the
finger on top of her
head, and she stays in it, like, but you could see her kind of go like, I wasn't expecting that, which Dedger wasn't expecting it either.
Right.
But and then he walks around the whole way into the frame, which I think sort of works with like what you're saying, is that they see it, but oh man, he scares me.
It's so amazing. Yeah. I love, so there was the article you sent me from StarWars.com is that Tony Gilroy said that you just give Ben Mendelsohn the cape and the set and you walk away. And he just like does the rest himself.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what he did in that scene.
She also said in the first meeting scene that she asked the director to do a take where she walked away, and they ended up keeping that take. because it sort of gives her a little bit where she, that's actually challenging somebody, like you're dismissing them almost, which I like that kind of dynamic. But at the end, Krennic gets a little bit of a win, even though against her poor Dedra.
I know.
In a Narkina jail cell.
Yes, but what a satisfying ending for her, right? I mean, we're not supposed to like her, and she's getting her comeuppance in the end. Probably gonna build the second Death Star now. Who knows? Oh, okay. So, and this whole time, Dedra really is in white. The only time she chooses black is for that scene with Cyril's mother, Edie.
Yep.
The dinner party from hell scene. And she chooses black for that one. But she has this amazing white trench coat. Like, those trench coats are great. Don't you want to wear one? Like,
I do.
They're just so fabulous. But she trades that for the pristine white Narkina prison outfit. Poor thing. And then she balls up in a little ball of tears at the end.
Yeah, well, she knows what her fate is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yay. Poor thing.
Okay. Well, should we move on to Vel?
Yeah.
It's played by Faye Marseille. And as you said in our previous episode, she is a warrior. And
for sure.
Yeah, she's a warrior. And unfortunately, she loses her love. But I feel like she's an example of, finding family. And I just think that's great. Like, her moment with Clea at the end where she brings her into the fold is so lovely. But before we get to that, I think we should go to the second arc where Vel and Cinta go to help the Gormans. And she gets a great speech here. So everyone gets some great speeches in this series of great speeches.
When she tells Sammy not to look away.
Yeah, yes. So after
No
Cinta
cry.
was needlessly killed, yes. Yeah, she shows that she has grown. She is a warrior. She knows that warriors die on the battlefield. And she has her wits about her enough to really just calmly tell that Gorman, Sam, is that what she said? Sammy?
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah. She tells that Gorman who shot her how he would be haunted by this moment forever. And that you killed a warrior, someone who's much greater than you. And wow, he just plays it so well. He's such a sniveling little kid. Just crying.
But Sam does rise up.
Step
he
up.
Gets his wits and slams the crap out of that KX droid that becomes K2SO. So he, in a way, I feel like Vel has succeeded in making Cinta's death change somebody.
Have some meaning.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. She tore
like
up that scene though. I was like, I was kind of like,
I was bawling. Yeah. That whole episode. Oh my God. That really takes a lot out of you, that episode.
That scene when Val and Cinta are sitting in the yin yang window.
Yes. I love that.
And then you see that yin yang window again when Cassian and Cyril are having their battle and they're fighting in front of it. I'm like, oh, they were using that yin yang all over the place. Against each other's.
I love that. Yeah, and I think Vel was sitting and Cinta was standing, and they were on the opposite sides of the yin yang symbol. It was so cool. Like what a great image.
To me, she's been a fascinating character from the first time we met her. I almost thought she was Luthen's daughter, the way they
talked about that.
Yeah. And, she said she took the oath, and it was just, she was so determined for the cause and so accepting of Luthen's orders. Sort of like when he tells Clay, when I tell you to move. It's sort of like she has that adherence to his ideology, but we see that if anything, it's more of like a problematic kind of father-daughter relationship. Even the actress who plays Clea says that she doesn't really love him, like she hates him too. And I think you see that in Val as well. Like there's some hate that he is somebody that's caused trauma in their lives as well, but she's able to sort of rise out of it and become a positive thing from her trauma throughout this, being supportive for Mon, being there for Cassian, saying the right thing for Cassian at times, saying the right thing to Bix. So I just like that her character seems to always rise out of it. I mean, she's born into a rich family, obviously could have just stayed comfortably there and chooses not to.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, she really does.
And she
ahead.
has one of the great moments too, where she finds Melshi's gun, which is just a cute little, storytelling moment where that gun gets kind of passed around through the show in the first season and ends up in Melshi's hand. So it was the gun that Cassian stole from Cyril that he took to, what was that? Niam's place and hid it. And then after Melshi and he escaped, they went back and he retrieved the gun and gave it to Melshi. And now she's recognized the gun because he had it in the Aldani arc. And anyway, that was a cool little nugget that, you had to sort of know the lore to go, oh, that's why she would recognize that gun.
Right. I was like, okay, I know that's the gun that Cassian gave to Melshi on Niamos, but like, where was it before? Yeah. And I think I was listening to a podcast episode that went through that whole thing too. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So cool.
And one of the things that just really stuck out to me was we see Vel and Mon Mothma eating in that luxurious apartment in Coruscant. And then at the end of the series, we see them having breakfast among the people, really looking just normal. And
at that table, that's very much reminds me of Mina Rao. You got this homestead kind of family cafeteria, really.
Community.
Yeah. There you go.
What Mina Rao was meant to represent. And I also love Vel and Cassian's toast. That was one of my favorite moments.
Yes.
And it's just a great way to remind people of all the things that they've lost and all the people who were sacrificed. And, he asked her to toast a Luthen, and they continue on toasting Gorn, Nemik, Terramond, Cinta, the Gorman people, the people of Ferrix, Cassian's mother, the Dons, who are the Aldani people, and then Aldani itself, which I think it sounds like that place probably got wrecked pretty bad after what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's when they implemented that whole PORD thing that made Cassian's sentence that much greater. But yeah, that I'm sure they did that with the Donnie people.
They're probably all making Death Stars too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I sort of think of Vel as like the glue of the rebellion. You have people that hold it all together with, the way she just so even when Mon asked her to go spy on Cassian, she's like, yeah, I'm just going to tell you. Mon wants me to spy. So tell me your story.
Yeah, that was cool. She like laid it out on the line. Yeah. So then when you watch Rogue One and there's that moment when Jyn is on Yavin and, she's looking for a crew to go infiltrate
Scarif.
Scarif, thank you. And she turns around and there's Cassian with a whole bunch of men behind her. I'm like, well, where is Vel and Clea? Like they should be there too. But I'm glad they're not.
That's why they need their own show to answer that question.
Yes.
They're on another critical mission.
I'm glad they're not because they all die, all those people.
They're probably recruiting all the what is it? The many what does Mon Mothma say in the movie?
The
many
Bothans.
Bothans. They're probably off recruiting Bothans or something.
That would be great. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. Vel, she doesn't have a big part in this second season, but it's packs a wallop, I would say.
I think so. She's there to balance off of what we're seeing Cassian go through this arc of freeing himself from Luthen, but learning to understand that Luthen is right on some things and actually becoming the tip of Luthen's spear, I would call him, where he does, once he realizes that Luthen sacrificed himself to get this information, he knows it's really important. And he does what needs to be done and understands the urgency of it and carries that through to its conclusion. So it's that idea of wrestling with a father figure, you know, in this, it's like a not true father figure, but a father figure, and then, you know, making yourself whole in a different way, but maybe learning something from that figure and making it your own, I guess.
Yeah.
As he does that walk.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like all you can, and you can just see all this weight on his shoulders that the Force healer talks about is like with him at that point.
He's like gathering. What does she say?
Yes,
You're gathering.
She's gathering.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're gathering for a place to be. Oh, I love it. Well, should we get into Mon Mothma?
Absolutely.
Played by Genevieve O'Reilly. And oh my gosh, I love this character. I love that this, you know, this kind of throwaway character we see in Return of the Jedi, and like here she is being really fleshed out as a full woman, and you know, here she really steps into her leadership role. And I feel like, you know, her speech to the Senate naming Palpatine is of course another great speech in this show of great speeches. And I guess initially they were going to cut around it, and Tony Gilroy asked Genevieve O'Reilly if he should write the whole speech, and she said, yes, I want to give the whole speech. And I feel like we got to hear the whole speech.
Yeah, we
did.
I
don't think they cut around it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's
all
great.
Right.
I like that we're seeing it from all these different perspectives. And even Cass, they're like, do you want to go watch her speech? Because she has to give another one. Later on, that's in Rebels.
Right.
The speech is in Rebels, but the Cassian's like, no, I've heard her talk, because we saw him pretty much watch the whole thing.
That's so great. And well, okay, so let's go back. So do you have some things you want to say about her in the earlier episodes?
I mean, the wedding, we talked about the wedding in the last episode, and just seeing her peel back. It's like she's an onion, because you see her like kind of lose her identities, being a mother, and maybe this identity of not having to get her hands dirty before she has to deal with Tay Coma, and she thinks she has allies, and she's sort of regrouping in this time where she's working with Bail, working to build this rebel alliance. I think trying to isolate herself from Luthen, but again, in the sequence of that third arc, we see her peeled down again, where she realizes Erskine has been working for Luthen, that Luthen really has her over a barrel to, you know.
Can I interrupt you at this?
Yeah.
At this one? Okay. So when Mon Mothma realizes that Erskine, who is her aide, has been working for Luthen, she goes to her office and confronts Erskine, but she doesn't confront him face to face. She turns her back on him and asks, you know, how long have you been working for Luthen? And at that moment where, you know, he tells her, oh, it's been since the wedding. So it's 2 years at that point. At the moment that she dismisses him, because she's just so enraged, because she just thinks she can't trust anybody at this point. She is in the center of the frame. And as we talked about, that's the character that you're with. And she actually steps into the framing where the window behind her is like this curved thing right on her shoulders. It's sitting on her shoulders. It's looking out onto the world of Coruscant. So literally the weight of the world and the galaxy is on her shoulders, and she takes it on by stepping into that place. And she feels in that moment that it's just her, that, you know, she can't trust anyone. She can't trust Luthen. She can't trust Erskine. She can't trust whoever's going to extract her from the Senate, but she knows that she has to say this speech and name Palpatine as the monster. So that is my favorite framing in the entire season 2 of Andor.
She's even gonna potentially say it, knowing that she could get captured if Bail's people, you know, Luthen saying, I have somebody that, you know, she doesn't really know what's gonna happen. It's all this like sort of blind, just jumping off, that, you know, she says the word genocide in a speech. And
Yep.
she says the emperor is like the monster that we all face.
Mhm.
I mean, she laid it all out there and they're going to arrest her. And she really doesn't know the plan.
No. Like she is leaping with, it's a leap of faith. And then, Cassian tells her I have friends everywhere. And she goes with him and he puts on that bronze jacket over her. And I feel like that's kind of armor. What do you think that is?
Oh, that's one of my favorite scenes when they come in and, Bale's people are there. And what does Erskine say? She's a rebel spy.
Yeah. And Cassian just shoots point blank.
Yeah, he's like, nah, I'm gonna. She's gone. Bye. And there's this great moment where they don't really have a plan. That's where Cassian's sort of like chess
Flounders.
Playing. Improvisation works very well in that moment. And she has the blue overcoat.
Yes.
And takes
and white is underneath.
Yeah, and takes it off. And she actually goes down and practices a speech in the white, but it's when she talks to Luthen. And then that's the point where she really takes it off. And we have this like dramatic moment that she takes off kind of her Senate robes, essentially, and becomes a member of the Rebel Alliance as she's whisked off. And he says, "Welcome to the rebellion." And
yes.
And she's wearing his coat at that point. And now Cassian finally is in Rebel blue in that moment that he's been hiding under the trench coat. So it's a cool reversal because people are looking for a guy in this tannish orange trench coat and a woman in blue. And they're walking around as a woman dressed in white and a guy in a blue outfit, white with the tan trench coat on. And he's wearing a blue outfit now. So they're not, that's a very spycraft thing.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Also, so, she sees her driver come up and once they've almost escaped and, Cassian asks, what's your driver's name? What's your driver's name? And he goes, hey, buddy. And like kills him right in front of her. And she's just so horrified. And why do you think that, she is so horrified in these moments? I mean, she knows that Luthen has had Take Homa killed. Why do you think she's so horrified?
Well, when she knew that Tay was being killed, she knew it was happening, but she didn't have to face it. So this is her moments where she has to face the getting your hands dirty, the part of the rebellion that
the ugly
to
part.
her isn't like it's conceptually there, and Luthen's been telling her about it, but she hasn't wholly realized it in a way that it's in your head. Like seeing something die or somebody die is a different experience. And even though she says he's a plant, the Chloris is a plant,
yes,
ISB plant, that she's still known him for a long time. And to see it happen, the first death is, a lady she doesn't know, but I think it's so startling. And then the second one is like somebody she knows, and it's, I don't think she finally realizes it's like either him, he was coming to get her and take her away, and she knew that. And then, immediately you're like, no, I'm going to be okay, but somebody died. Whoa, wow, that happens. It's just this great moment. There's so many memes of her with that face, of shock next to Cassian. She does a great job of like, whoa.
She really did.
Coming. But it makes it work later on because she sees what Cassian had to do. And I think when he comes in and says, this is what happened, and Luthen, sacrifices life, she actually does appreciate their mentality as spies and what they have to do and kind of the things they have to sacrifice. She's seen where he's had to live. And so she has a lot more insight into Cassian than anybody else in that table in the Rebel Alliance.
Right.
Does.
Yeah. When he asked permission to see the infirmary, she's like, yes, go.
Yeah.
At the end there.
Yeah. She owes him a debt of gratitude.
Yes. Yeah, I also felt like, she's been so wrapped in this life of luxury. I mean, the Senate, everything is so clean and beautiful and things are presented beautifully for her, that to see this ugliness right in front of her also is very horrifying.
She can comprehend death and large swaths of death, like when she talks about the genocide, but I think it's different to see it. Like, you could see pictures and you hear people talk about numbers, and she understands all the concepts of propaganda and the truth and the lies that are happening and the politics of it. But now it's like a real messy thing in front of her that, individuals dying, choices she make will cost people their lives.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she even says to Bale, what's the line? This is even messier than the Senate, when they're having that discussion in the conference room. Like, she's trying to deal with Saw Gerrera, who's
crazy.
Well, he's not crazy. He's crazy like a fox. Saw Gerrera is on top of what's happening. He knows Jeddah, where is it at? And if he hadn't have been there, they wouldn't have necessarily accepted all of the intel from Luthen, right? It's a fact that one of the informants, Tivik, is calling Kat to speak to Cassian as well, that helps pull all the pieces together. So Saw being there and being on top of the Imperials and wondering why they're stealing Kyber and oppressing these people, it is necessary for what happens. They just, like the same way they're kind of like, oh, we don't want to deal with Luthen, and they sort of badmouth him, and Cassian says, no, you need people like Luthen. You need people like Saw, even though they're a little wacky. Some of the things that they see and understand are right.
Right. Okay, so in light of all these women that live on, these 5 women, and of course Cassian and Bix's baby, do you think there's hope for season 3?
I think the biggest hope we have is to see other characters. I mean, it could be something with Bix. It could be something with Clea, but it wouldn't be Andor season 3.
Well, no. Yeah. Right. I feel like...
Could they tell their stories? Absolutely.
Yes. I feel like there's so much that they could say, like story-wise, and like Mon building the rebellion. I would love to see what happened with her daughter. Like just interfacing with her daughter and her new husband, and like the fallout from her speech. What does it do to them? And then Bix, of course, has her baby, and Vel and Clea, maybe they build a friendship together. And I'd love to even see Dedra in prison. Like, what happens with that? And what happened to this whole prison system,
It falls apart. Well,
yeah.
Tony Gilroy made a point. He said, you should always walk away leaving more toys in the sandbox than you took. And I think he did that.
He absolutely did.
There's been this mindset in the franchise of, we didn't see a character in A New Hope, so they must not exist, or they must have been dead by that point, right? Yes. And it's a big, huge galaxy. There could be a lot of other things going on. And as we see in how Andor plays out, all these moving parts, like I mentioned, Saw has to be doing what he's doing, and all the little things have to be going on at the same time to make these moments. So absolutely, these characters could be doing something really important and impactful in another part of the galaxy. Like there's things happening, and all of them, I think that's because they're really wholly formed characters, as you wonder about what are those things? Why isn't Clea in Rogue One? But if you're a storyteller, you can make a perfectly good reason why she's not there, that she's doing something else.
Meeting with those Bothans.
Exactly.
He's getting some relations.
Doing spycraft somewhere else. Maybe she's onto it already. I mean, you just don't, you don't know. And the characters are so intriguing and so whole and real that you do want to know. And that's what I hope we see. Even if we see some books
Yeah.
and other stuff. Although Tony Gilroy he was like really annoyed that they wrote the K2SO origin story, and he's like,
Yeah,
no, I'm not
comic.
doing that.
Yep. Yeah.
He made a really good point about when they sent him the original idea for Andor, that, you know, it was supposed to be K2SO Cassie and sort of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid type of idea. But he said the problem with K2SO is that anytime he's in a story, like, he can only do one thing, and you can't defeat him.
Right.
So he's really hard to be in a story. And he said, if you notice, he said in Rogue One, I keep pushing him out of the story because he makes it too hard for things to happen.
Like on the ship and things. And
Stay in the ship.
Yep. Which is really funny because, Alan Tudyk was always the Firefly. He was the captain.
Pilot the ship.
Stay in the ship.
Yeah,
Yep.
Stay in the ship.
Love it. Wow. All right. Well, does that wrap up our discussion?
I think so. I mean, thank you, Tony Gilroy, for creating a show where women are so important and central to it. I said that in my review when we got to drop our reviews, that I thought the show said that women really were the heart of the rebellion. And, that's how he sort of concluded it when, he has this discussion about it. I was honestly a little bit nervous, but I think they pulled it off. So
you were nervous about what? Which part?
Just not everything that he's written has a lot of women have fallen into tropey things. And it's nice to see that you can have, and I think this is possible, that you can learn to grow outside of your tropes. Even women can write tropes and be stuck in them. So it's not like just because you're a man, but some of his stories do have a lot of tropes. I don't think the problems necessarily with Jin in Rogue One are his problems. He was trying to fix a problem. And the problem with Jin's story isn't the concept of it, and that everything she has to do is an action that her father wants her to do. Whereas if you see in Andor itself, he's dealing with that idea, is that you have parental figures and then you free yourself from them and then create your own identity. All the characters do that. So I know that Tony Gilroy understood the problems with Jin's story. He just couldn't fix them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's interesting you say that about the tropes, because did Tony Gilroy, he wrote, I'm trying to see, those series a long time ago, series of movies.
The Bourne
Identity movies. Yeah. I tried to watch that first one. So tropey.
Yes.
I couldn't get through it. I was like, oh, what is this?
But he also wrote Cutting Edge, which is a favorite.
It is. It's like one of our favorites. I love it. Toe pick. I say that's randomly, and my Richard Still is like, what? It's Cutting Edge.
I mean,
yeah, but yeah. So it proves that storytellers can grow and and learn. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm sure you guys have talked about on Skywalking.
Yes,
Andor itself. So what can people listen to?
All right, so. We've plugged some previous episodes, but if you want to hear an Arc 3 discussion, the Gorman Massacre from Richard and I, that is actually on Who's the Boss podcast, episode 226 with Mike Celestino. And I have that posted on our website as well, because we get into it's like a 2-hour episode. It's really fascinating discussion.
You had the best arc, I think, to talk about.
Yeah, it was fun. We got to choose our arc way in advance, and when we were watching the screeners, Mike was like, I think you guys chose the best arc. So that was fun. And then an arc 4, so the finale discussion, is on Skywalking Through Neverland episode 516, and we actually had on actor Christopher Sean on the show. We know him best as the voice of Kaz from Star Wars Resistance. And he's first of all, he's the nicest guy. Yeah. And he just had some really masterful emotional insight into the characters that he talked about in that episode. So it's a great perspective, as well as Richard and my thoughts on that final arc. So really good discussions. We'll link that in our show notes.
Oh,
anything
awesome.
for you?
Yeah, Hyperspace Series, we dropped our episodes 1 through 3 discussion, which is kind of talking about how the storytelling is setting up the main characters and just how we see that they're going to be used. We do this knowing the full scope of the story. So we're not talking about spoilers, but that's how we want to set it up, is what are they trying to do with these characters, particularly talking about like that Cassian sees that the rebellion needs a leader. So that's one of the reasons he steps into rescuing Mon Mothma. And she's very much to him like his mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to rescue people that he couldn't necessarily save. That's everything that Cassian does. He couldn't save his sister. He couldn't save his mother. You know, that it's driving him to do these things. So we talk about that. And then coming up recording, we have 2 more episodes planned. It's always fun because I always try to I want to talk about Fangirls Going Rogue about one thing.
Right.
We're going to talk about, because Tony Gilroy is like a history buff and particularly revolutionary history. So we're going to go into some of the real life events that inspired moments in the show. And that's how we're going to frame our discussion of the Gorman arc, which is, some parts, it kind of expands over 9 episodes, what we know about what happens with Gorman. So propaganda, warfare, revolution, talking about like inspirations that would have been there, like the Battle of Algiers is inspiration for the actual massacre episode. That's a movie that's made like a documentary, which is sort of how they tried to frame that episode. And so we're going to dive into all that. We're like, this episode is like massive and notes everywhere. So it's one of those ones you have to really research before you do it.
I get it. I can't wait for that to drop because
and then we'll have one more episode that we have planned out that we're going to talk about points of view, also mapped out and ready to be discussed. So it should be up soon.
Nice. Well, I'll have you know that Richard did ask me when that episode about the history is dropping. So we're really
it'll be coming shortly. One. Still, I think this weekend we're recording it. So hopefully it'll be out around the same time this episode's out, because this is a June summer episode.
Woohoo! Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely. All right. Wow. Well, so much fun and lots to listen to, everyone. So in between shows, you can visit us over at fangirlsgoingrogue.com. You can also find us everywhere at FG Going Rogue. Tricia is at Fangirl Cantina, and I am at Jedi Tink.
You can send us email, contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook. Just search Fangirls Going Rogue and like the Facebook page and request to join the Facebook group and answer those questions.
And please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. We need your reviews so more people can find us.
So until next time, do.
Yub.
Yub. I have friends everywhere.
This site is not affiliated in any way with Lucasfilm Limited LLC, the Walt Disney Company, or any of their affiliates or subsidiaries.
Yep.